Paul Harvey told of a little 5-year-old who was in the backyard, and she was brushing her dog's teeth. And her dad came out and said, "Sweetheart, what in the world are you doing?" And she said, "Don't worry, Daddy. I'll put your toothbrush back like I always have." Oh, to be kids. One person said, you begin to realize the generation gap when your teenager comes into your room in the morning and says, "Today is nerd day at school. Dad, can I borrow some of your clothes?" But anyway, today I want to end this series, and I've entitled the message, "The Greatest Joy." Look here. I mean what I'm saying. The message today is about the greatest joy of parenting. And if you have any confidence in me, I'm telling you the truth. I've seen it become a reality. You can take God at His word, and it is the greatest joy. In fact, I would say every joy that comes with parenting pales in comparison to this. And John hit the nail on the head when he said in 3 John 1:4, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth." Most of you do not have grandchildren. Many of you are rearing your children right now. And so the question is, how do you do that? Of the relatively little in the Bible that's addressed to children about that, one of the verses that I think if a person has known Christ for any period of time and they started to really wonder about this thing of how do you rear children, raise children, Proverbs 22:6 comes to mind, where the Bible says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Leave that up, if you will. You see those words, train up? That simply means to create a thirst, to direct, to lead. And as parents, that's how we train up. We create a thirst. You know, the old thing, I can almost taste it, you know, that thirst that you have. You create a thirst. You direct your child. You lead your child. Dad used to tell me, he said, "Son, you can take a horse to the trough, but you can't make him eat. But there's nothing that says you can't salt his oats." And that's what we do when we train up a child in the way that he shall go. That means according, watch this, to the unique characteristics of the child. And each child has unique characteristics. I remember going into Tara's bedroom when she was a little girl. I don't know how old she was, let's say 6, 7, 8, I don't know. But I went in there and by that time I had been a parent for all those years, plus 4 for Brooke. Brooke's almost 4 years older than her. And so, I was ready to write a book on how to parent. And so I walk in and I forget what it was, but anyway, I felt like I needed to say something to her and make my point come across. And, so I went into her bedroom. She's in bed. I do it just like I'd always done to Brooke. And I was expecting tears to come down. And, as I turned and walked out of the room, I was ready for her to say, "Daddy, I'm so sorry." And so I did my thing, turned around, ready for that automatic response, got to the door, nothing happened. So I turned around. I thought, well, I probably didn't do it right, so I did it again. Turned around, nothing happened. And at that moment, I knew what Solomon was saying when he says, "Train up a child in the way that he or the way that she should go according to the unique characteristics of your child." What I want to do, there's a whole lot I could cover today, but I want to boil it down, if I could, to 4 things a parent must do. Now, there are other things you might, but I'm just telling you as a parent, if you want your child, if you want to experience the greatest joy, okay, these things have to be a part of it, okay? You know, they have to be a part of it. And let me just say this. This is not a promise. It's a principle. Every child needs to make a decision as an act of their own will. My father couldn't force me into heaven, but he could do everything he could to get me there. And so as a parent, what I'm saying is that if you want to know what it is to see your child one day, then we just have to do everything as a parent that we know that we're supposed to do. And so let me give you 4 things a parent must do. And say the word must. And I mean that. Number 1, first thing, teach your child they are significant. They're significant. Psalm 139, verse 14, early in their life, explain this to your child. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what God has to say about every single child. But you know, let me interject right here. There's some false assumptions that we have. And, you know, one of them is that our relationship with our children should take priority over our relationship with our spouse. I covered this in the first message. Not so. And it's good to recall that marriage is permanent. Parenting, if I could say it, and rearing that child till they leave home is temporary. It's a passing thing. And listen, if a husband or wife loves their child more than their spouse, their marriage is in trouble. You can take that to the bank. Number 2, this is not, I'm sorry, I say number 2, everybody goes with their notes. A second false assumption is that people think that, well, children are meant to be the center of the family, that everything revolves around the children. That's not true. The rightful center of the family, listen, is the relationship of a husband and a wife, of a father and a mother. So how do you create a culture of significance? Well, let me list a few things, okay? And I want to be as practical as I can this morning. Number 1, as a parent, have a healthy attitude about yourself. You got to have a healthy attitude about yourself. Proverbs 23:7, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. And so if you want to create a culture of significance, then you got to have a healthy attitude about yourself. You know, if you want a child to see how significant God sees them, that they're fearful, you need to see yourself that way. And by the way, the worth that God puts on you has nothing to do with your performance. You can't do anything to make God love you less. And you can't do anything to make God love you more. If you say, I know Jesus is my Savior, listen, regardless of how you're living, you're accepted in the beloved. Now, just want to tell you that God takes care of his kids. He loves his kids, and whom the Lord loves, he chastens. But you got to have a healthy attitude about yourself. And I'm not talking about a mental think and that kind of stuff, but as a man thinks in his heart. And I base what I think about myself on not what somebody says about me or what I think about me. Good night. No, but what God says about me. Number 2. Second thing I would tell you, if you want to create a culture of significance, have your child help around the house. And by the way, compliment them when they do a small job well. Proverbs 22:29, there's a very interesting verse. Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. God has an awful lot to do say about a work ethic, and that ought to begin at home. And that's part of building a significance in a child. And so, yeah, mom, dad, yeah, sure, you can do it better. But let that child help around the house. And I would encourage you to start at an early age. Number 3, introduce by name your child to others. An editor of a national magazine said, and I quote, "I can predict the climate of relationships between youth and their parents almost every time by noticing if parents introduce their children to me by name." It contributes to a child's significance, to their self-worth. Introduce your child and introduce your child to others by name. Number 4, let your child respond to a question when asked. You see, if you answer, if you're with other individuals and your child's asked a question and you answer it, it'll humiliate your child. It's by the way, it's rude too. A number of years ago, when, I don't know if it was on spring break or winter break or college or whatever it was, but a college student came home and I saw them in the foyer and I asked them and I said, how's everything going in college? And as soon as I asked that question, the mother right there said, oh man, it's going great for her. And I really wanted to take that mom aside and said, you don't realize what you're doing right there. I asked that question to your daughter and not to you. And so let your child respond to a question when asked. And by the way, when the mom asked, I could see that college student, I could see her face just kind of go down like that. Number 5, whenever possible, give your child the privilege of choice. They say that personality is developed through making decisions. And learn to live with the results. And sometimes you need to make that, but whenever possible, give your child the privilege of choice. I remember being on vacation down in the mountains in Tennessee, and I can remember pulling up to a stoplight right there, and I asked, it was Debbie and Brooke and Tara, we were on vacation, and I said, where do you want to eat lunch? I was going to give them a choice. What an idiot I was. I had 3 girls. True story, ask them, they're right there. One said Schlotsky's Deli, one said McDonald's was across the street, and the other said Wendy's. And because of the loving father and husband that I was, 2 things. Number 1, I went to each of those. Number 2, I said, I will never again ask, where do you have lunch? But anyway, whenever possible, give your child, give them the privilege of choice. Number 6, spend time with your child. I remember my father when I was a young kid. Sports was everything to me. And I can remember playing Little League. And my last year in Little League, I can remember I pitched a no-hitter. And the next day, my father came home with a catcher's mitt. And I thought, I'm pitch and I play shortstop. Why did you buy me a catcher's mitt? He didn't buy me a catcher's mitt. He bought a catcher's mitt for him. And every day, just about when he would come home, tired from getting up at 1:30 in the morning and driving a truck, he would get that catcher's mitt, put on his, take his shirt off, and he'd sit there and he just would catch and I would pitch. I remember my dad, he got home in early afternoon or mid-afternoon at the latest, but normally it was very early. That's because he started at 3 o'clock in the morning and would drive the truck and get back to the terminal. And he would let me take a bus and I'd walk from my house down Monte all the way to 4th Street, and I would catch a bus and take it down a half a block from his terminal. I'd get off the bus, I'd walk, and my dad would get me in that old 35 Ford that he was restoring, and he would take me to At that time was Briggs Stadium. Now it was Tiger Stadium, but it's down now. But he would park the car and we would go, and he would buy the cheapest tickets and sit in the center field bleachers, upper deck. Just my dad and me. Funny what you remember. Spend time with your child. The small boy was watching his father polish his car. He said, "Dad, your car's worth a lot, isn't it?" He says, "You bet it is. And if you take real good care of it, and it's worth more when you sell it." And the little boy said, "Dad, I guess I'm not worth very much." Number 7, occasionally trust your child with things which surprise him. And you can fill in the blank as to what that is. But it's just a part of building the significance. So number 1, teach your child they're significant. I'm just telling you, if your child doesn't see that they're significant, listen, what you want to build up is you want them to be able to see what God says. And if they live in a climate, a culture, in a home, much less in a culture, where they are just nothing and no one, and they may have a low self opinion of themselves, if you don't create a culture of significance, they're going to have a big hurdle to get over. They may come to Christ, but they'll never see themselves the way that God says they are. Number 2, recognize your child's need for security. Now, let me mention some contributing factors that create insecurity, okay? These are the things that create insecurity. Number 1, parental conflict. James chapter 4, verse 1 says, "Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members?" From those evil desires in there. There was a study done on troubled teenagers. And they derived at the end of the study of the 3 most frequently reasons for kids using drugs. And in order of times most mentioned, here is the reason, the top 3 reasons why these troubled teenagers use drugs. Number 2, desire for personality change. Number 3, the third thing was peer group pressure. But the number 1 thing that was said most as to why they turned to drugs was parental conflict. Few things, folks, are more threatening to a child than to see the ones that he loves the most constantly quarreling. Don't fight, Mom and Dad. I always say in a premarital, get a lock on your bedroom door. You're going to need it, okay? But if you got something to say, and hey, I told Deb, if you and I agree on everything, one of us is unnecessary. And you have disagreements. And there are times, yeah, and I did, and she disagreed one time. Yeah. Oh my goodness. But anyway, there are times when this is no cop out, but there are times, okay? And if things get tense, then you know what? Go to the bedroom, lock the door, and do it quietly, but don't fight in front of your kids, and don't fight even with each other. Talk it through. It may be tense, but do that, but don't quarrel. Parental conflict, I'm telling you, creates a culture of insecurity for a kid. Number 2, mobility. Second contributing factor that creates insecurity. And by that, I mean this. Now, listen. You may have to move. Okay. Here's what I'm saying. Carefully sift in your move how that is going to impact your family. Because what you and corporate America may view as a promotion may be a demotion. How it affects your family. Mobility, that can breed insecurity with a child. Number 3, and listen, it doesn't mean don't move. I mean, number of you moved all over when you were young, and I marvel and am blessed by you, because I was in the same home after 3 years of age and all of my life. Number 3, lack of proper discipline. Lack of proper discipline. Colossians 3:21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Don't dishearten your kid. I mean, there are times you're going to have to say no, but don't do it nasty. Be their dad, not their dictator. And lack of proper discipline builds insecurity with the child. Number 4, absence of parents. Absence of parents. There's a reason why God has parents there with the family. Number 5, continual criticism. Continual criticism. Look at this verse, Psalm 19:14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. If you walk out here and go back through a couple of doors to where I come into this worship center from my office, you will see that verse right there. I mentioned this, I think, in one of my previous messages. Corey had Brendan do that. Brendan, our creative design guy, and to remind me, because oftentimes I'll say that as I pray, because I want that there, that the words of, when I preach to you, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart will be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. And if it is, then that's really all I care for. But that's what we as dads and moms ought to be saying, as how we speak and how we deal and interact with our child. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart, Lord, be acceptable in your sight, because you know what's going on in our home. You know what's going on in my child's life. You know what I really want, but oh God, I don't want to do it the wrong way. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a pitcher of silver. In a book entitled The Making of a Delinquent, they studied 1,000 juvenile delinquents, and they said rejection by parents is a major factor leading children to a life of crime. Kids get crushed. I've seen parents, I've seen them look to their kid and say, you're stupid. And you can see the kid, how the kid is crushed, or you can't do anything right. Continual criticism breeds insecurity in a child. 6th contributing factor, give a child things rather than yourself. When you give a child things and you don't give them yourself, that breeds insecurity. And then number 7, insecure parents. That goes back to how you view yourself. If you're insecure yourself, that's going to breed. Now, how can parents encourage a child's sense of security? Let me give you 7 things real quickly. Remember, when you train up a child, what do? You create a thirst, you direct, you lead. So let me give you 7 things. Write them down real quickly. Number 1, parents who love each other. You give your child a mom and a dad that love each other, that, I'm telling you, that encourages security within a child. Number 2, parents' love for their children. Parents' love for their children. Number 3, strong family unity. Do things and do them together. My girls still remember when we took them down to the mountains in North Carolina where the movie The Last of the Mohicans was filmed. They still, Brooke and Tara, still remember walking across Pickett's Charge and Little Round Top in Gettysburg while Debbie sat in the car. Not going to be a happy lunch today. No, I'm just teasing. Yeah, okay. Anyway, it was raining. It was raining. I got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as my message last week said. Okay, but strong family unity. Number 4, regular routine. I would encourage you, have your meals at as much as you can at a regular time. Have bedtime at a regular time when that child is growing up. Number 5, proper discipline. Don't be over permissive. Don't be indecisive. I mean, a child needs to know clearly what is expected of them. They need to know what the boundaries are. Number 6, I would say, hug your child. Hug your child. And number 7, a sense of belonging. Where that child, they have a sense of belonging to you and to the family. John Dresser said, a sense of belonging is essential for a child's security and feeling of worth. And when a child feels he belongs in his family and is of real worth, it is not a big step also to feel accepted, loved, and of worth to others and to God. 4 things you must do. Number 1, teach your child they are significant. Number 2, recognize your child's need for security. Number 3, cultivate a climate of love. Proverbs 15:17. Now in your notes it says 17:15. Change that. That's my mistake. Proverbs 15:17. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted calf with hatred. There is an inner drive, folks, to be loved and to love. It's very strong. God put that in us. And all through life, we want to make friends. Listen very, very carefully. As parents, the way we extend love to our child profoundly affects their ability to relate effectively to others. There was a study of maladjusted teenagers in a large Oklahoma high school, which, by the way, underscores how important it is to tell your child that he or she is loved. Counselors had the first group, and these were the 10 most what they thought were maladjusted teenagers in this large high school. And they worked hard to gain the confidence of these teenagers. And finally, they asked them the question, how long has it been since your parents told you that they loved you? And only one of them remembered ever hearing their parents say, I love you, and they couldn't remember when it was. On the contrast, same counselors, used the same procedures on 10 that the faculty felt were the best adjusted teenagers in this large Oklahoma high school. And without exception, all said that they had heard their parents say, I love you within the past 24 hours. This morning, some said last evening, some said yesterday. Let me make some statements about love. The first one is this. Number 1, the most effective way to teach love is to model it. Ephesians 5:33 says, nevertheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself. And let the wife see that she respects her husband. Let me say this to every man here. Men, the greatest thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. It provides security, stability, a sacredness about life that they gain no other way. No other way. Mom and Dad, Praise each other in the presence of your child. And when you talk to your child about your spouse, make sure it's loving words, kind words that you say about their father or their mother. You see, a child needs love and wants to know about love more than anything else. And if genuine love is not demonstrated at home, a child's going to pick up a false idea, and they'll do it through a movie, they'll do it through a culture, they'll do it through what they read, and by and large, it is just sex-driven. One high school student said, the thing that adds to the happiness of myself and my family is the way my mother and my father love each other. Second statement about love, love must be spoken. It must be spoken. Now, there are nonverbal ways. I mean, the hands, the squeeze, the eyes, the kiss. But I want you to get this. Love also requires verbal, oral expression. And I realize that there are some that feel, well, this is way too personal. I mean, I don't wear my this kind of stuff, Ken, on my sleeve. That's interesting because I bet you contradict it when you don't hesitate to give words of disapproval to your child. Tell them, just say, I love you. And they'll say, sooner or later, I love you. And I love you. Have it. Play a game, whatever it is. But love must be spoken. Cultivate a climate of love. Number 3, love calls for action. Because words without actions, folks, it's futile. It's futile. I read this story of a small boy, small son. He wanted a clubhouse in his backyard, and he asked his dad to build, and his dad promised and said, I'll do it. But his dad was on the weekend. It seemed like he was always busy with his business or a golfing date or some social event. And one day, his boy was in an accident. And at the hospital, as the father stood by the bedside of his dying son, the little boy said, well, Dad, I guess we'll never be able to build that clubhouse. Men and women, please understand. When that dad wrote that story, he realized that that boy didn't want that clubhouse near as much as he wanted his daddy. Love calls for action. Number 4, love involves trust. It involves trust. One very prominent, successful individual that was reared down in the Smoky Mountains. He was reared really in the backwoods. His life was rugged. But he was inspired by his parents who never went to high school to excel. And as a result, he got a scholarship to a university. And his father said the day he left for college, he said, son, I don't know much about the world in which you're going into, but I trust you. That successful businessman said, I never forgot those words. My dad said, son, I don't know much about the world you're going into, but I trust you. Suspicious parents produce sneaky children. And let me just pause right here and say to every kid, every child, every teenager, when your parents put trust in you, don't compromise that trust come hell or high water. Don't you do it. That trust and respect that a mom or dad has in a child, don't do anything to forfeit that. Number 5, love requires a willingness to listen. You know, when you open the book of James, James says something interesting. He says that we are to be swift to what? Swift to what? Swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Swift to hear. And you know, it is hard to listen sometimes. I mean, when you've been working all day and things are busy and you're tired. But parents, listen. We learn much more by listening than by talking, especially from a child. And listen carefully to their little hurts, to their complaints, to their joys. Because what that does is that communicates to that young child your love. It communicates to your teenager that you love them when you listen to what they have to say. And give your complete attention. Look into their eyes. Do you ever see a child, even young, when they're holding and they're saying, and they take their parents and they want their parents to look right at them? One of the things I did when the girls were, I always had them look in my eyes. I would get down on my knees or squat down and look because of how important that was. Don't forget what I'm about to say. In fact, I put it in your notes in that box. Parents who listen to their children when they are small will have children who listen to the parent when they are older. You listen to them. And I want to say something else. It's not in your notes. You might want to write it down. Let them talk about anything to you. Let them talk. I'd rather have them talk to you about whatever it is than to anybody else. And let me give you the fourth thing a parent must do. Fourth thing as a parent you must do. And that is number 4, lead your child to God. It is critical for a child to know how he stands with God. And I would tell you that it is essential for a child to have a correct concept of God early and nourish that very early. Don't ever say things like, God doesn't love you when you're bad. Don't ever say something like that. Remember, we're training up, we're leading that little one to God. Let me give you some very important principles from Scripture. The first one is this, number 1. First thing you want to know about leading your child to God, parents, be right with God yourself. Be right with God yourself. I love what it was said of Abraham in Genesis 18. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord. You see, a parent not only has to know the way and show the way, but you got to go the way too. If your influence is to count, you must be everything you expect of your child. John Balkway said, whatever parent gives his children good instructions and sets at the same time a bad example may be considered as bringing them food in one hand and poison in the other. Number 2, second important principle from Scripture, and that is the responsibility for the religious training of children rests squarely with parents. I've used this scripture a few times during this series, but I want to come to the end and use it again in Deuteronomy chapter 6. God said, "In these words which I command you today," talking to the fathers and to the mothers, "shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be in the frontlets between your eyes." Let me say 3 things about this. It's not in your notes. Just listen. First of all, God ordained the home. Say the word home. God ordained the home as the institution to train a child in a way that they were to go. And secondly, parents were to teach them diligently. We're to teach diligently. And number 3, spiritual development begins in the home. It doesn't begin in the church. It doesn't begin in the class. Oh, I'm going to take them and give them to the youth ministry or Kids City and they'll train. No, it right here with the home. And you don't have to be a theologian to be a senior pastor. I've been a senior pastor at this church for 30 years. I'm not a theologian. I'm just a kid from Detroit that got saved by the grace of God, and I burned the midnight oil, have the greatest teacher within me, the Holy Spirit of God. And what did I know about parenting? I'd never been a parent before. But I wasn't going to leave it up. I looked at the church. I looked at every Sunday school teacher or whatever they had, youth along the way, as complimenting and coming alongside Debbie and me, because religious instruction, spiritual development begins in the home. But there is a third principle, and that is this effort should be constant and continuous. Not hit or miss, not for a season. It ought to be in the morning, it ought to be at noon, it ought to be in the evening. They say, get this, that by the time a child is 15 years of age, don't miss this, by the time a child is 15 years of age, they will have asked 500,000 questions. And there are probably some of you moms that think they did it this past week. That's 500,000 opportunities to teach. If you take the most serious responsibility God will ever lay before you. It's not your job. It's not your career. The greatest gift, the greatest responsibility a mom and dad will ever have is that child that God has miraculously dropped in their life. What would you say if your child came to you and asked you one more question today? Whatever they call you, dad, mom, daddy, mommy, whatever they go. And they asked you, are you saved? Are you sure you're going to go to heaven when you die? And upon what do you base that? And I want to close this series by saying that if you're sitting here today and you are not absolutely confident that if you were to die before midnight, you go to heaven, then today, right now, is the moment when you need to make things right with God. God loves you. He loved you when you walked in. He's going to love you when you walk out. And nothing can change that. But if you've never asked Jesus Christ to come into your life and be your Lord and Savior, I want you to know, if you don't do that right now, you're going to walk out of here. God will love you, but you're on your way to hell. My Bible says God commended his love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. See that cross? I should have been crucified. I should have suffered and died. I should have hung on that cross in disgrace. But Jesus, God's Son, took my place. And he took your place too. So you don't have to spend eternity in hell. And on that cross, Jesus, first of all, became the recipient of your sin. God took your sin and my sin and placed him on his Son. And Jesus suffered our hell, our agony, our forsakenness. And he shed his blood so our sin could be forgiven. The Bible says where there's no shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. But there was only one blood that satisfied a holy God, and that was the innocent blood of his Son. Now listen carefully. Jesus said this. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. You're not going to get to heaven because you go to a certain church. You're not going to get to heaven because you go through these certain things or classes. You're going to go to heaven one way, and that is when you meet God on his terms. And God says, it's my son. And I want to say today that if you'll simply open your heart and ask Jesus Christ to come in, he'll forgive you of your sin. He'll bring you into his forever family. You'll walk out of here on your way to heaven. My Bible tells me this. I was born a sinner. I'm headed to hell. But God loved me so much, even though the wages of my sin was death, hell. The gift of God was eternal life. But it's through Jesus Christ our Lord. But God said this to you and to me. Whoever calls upon the name of my Son shall be saved.